Thank you for downloading today's presentation in preparation for the complaints workshop to be held on Thursday morning of Council next week. This presentation is a pre-workshop briefing on our complaints management approach at RACS. Today we are going to go back and review the original recommendations from the Expert Advisory Group, being the EAG, as complaints management was a core pillar to their recommendations. We are also going to reflect on the original design as endorsed by Council at the time, review the lessons we have learned along the way, and propose a future approach that may start addressing the current issues we are experiencing in managing complaints. You will also have received in your email a copy of case study scenarios that are de-identified actual complaint cases from the past few years to illustrate some of the lessons learned. So today, our agenda will cover a quick summary of the EAG recommendations related to complaints management, the original design as endorsed by Council in 2016, the types of complaints or issues that are out of scope for the current review. We are also going to review the Vanderbilt principles that Jerry Hickson has modelled across their complaints management systems, as there are some great aspects that we could apply in our revised approach. The lessons learned along the way. While these lessons at times have been really hard, we must remember that this is groundbreaking work that we are undertaking. No other organisation like us is taking on complaints in such a meaningful way, so that the work is hard, but most importantly, we're committed to continually improving and refining our processes. And finally, what could complaints management look like for RACS in the future? Complaints management was a core pillar in the EAG recommendations and action plans. These actions related to strengthening our processes to include central recording of all complaints, making sure our processes are timely and fair, and prevent confidentiality breaches, prevent the risk of victimisation, and allow for restorative approaches aimed at behaviour change instead of a legalistic approach. We will work proactively with hospitals in this space, as well as with other agencies, particularly in recognising limits to our powers. We need to clarify our approach for our members and ensure that we apply external scrutiny to our processes. I think that we all will agree that these recommendations and principles still apply and are just as relevant today as they were 3 years ago. But back in 2016, an approach to complaints management was developed. This is an extract from the 2016 ASC presentation on complaints management. It shows that in the original design, it included pathway mapping for resolution that at the time appeared consistent with our understanding of what we would want achieved. The initial pathway steps captured what we will do well, as the initial focus is for complaint triaging and direct resolution locally and through coaching. Our challenges start as we progress along the pathway into a more formalised approach, with the final pathway focused on investigation, prosecution and sanctions. What are we expecting at this stage is, and what we need to do for this stage is to make judgment. We are setting ourselves up for our role in making judgments on these complaints. This is where we face our greatest challenge. As soon as we include a judgment pathway, it elevates the needs of our whole system to be able to cope with a judgment call at the end of the process, and this requires an investigation. This next slide from the same 2016 ASC presentation captures the principles that we must follow in an investigation in order to make a judgment, the key principles being natural justice and procedural fairness. These are basic human right principles that we all agree upon and would want a RACS complaints process to follow. For RACs to make a judgment, we are bound by these rules of procedural fairness and natural justice, even though we are not a tribunal or court. There is no fast-track action around these principles. From a practical perspective, this means that to make a judgment, a complaint must be made in person by that person directly affected by the behaviour. It cannot be made on behalf of others. Experiences must be independent of others. So for our trainees, we cannot accept complaints from other people on their behalf, and they cannot provide us complaints together due to the risk of collusion. These restrictions come from the need for evidence to be obtained in a particular manner if we are going to use such evidence to make a judgment. Natural justice also requires that the person has a right of reply, which means that it is difficult for complaints to be anonymous, and they must include very detailed specifics. This enables a person to respond to a complaint allegation, as they need sufficient details of who, where, when, and how, dates, times, names, etc. This all means that having investigation as a key pathway in our complaints management approach drives a complaints process to be very officious and legalistic. Formalised with allegations documented from complaints and provided to respondents, with reporting back to the aggrieved of the response provided. It builds expectations on outcomes that are punishment related and ultimately erode the level of satisfaction in the process by everyone involved. Our learnings in all of this is that a complaint with an investigation required for resolution and judgment is virtually impossible for RACs to resolve due to the high degree of proof and evidence that we must gather. Ultimately, by tying our complaints management to judgment, our complaints process is very formal. It's based on allegation sharing and responding. It focuses on reporting back those responses to the aggrieved parties. We don't act on anonymous complaints. And ultimately, it's not trusted. I think that in the Building Respect evaluation report, that 55% of trainees still do not feel safe about making a complaint to the college. We need a review, which is our focus for today and the workshop together on Thursday. For clarity, there are a number of complaints that are out of scope for this review, as we want to remain focused on the discrimination, bullying and sexual harassment complaints. For this reason, we will not be discussing or covering complaints about fees, individual patient outcomes, RACs decisions. This is covered in the new 3-step reconsideration, review and appeals framework. This is a mechanism currently being designed which deals with those aggrieved by RACs decisions, generally those on a pathway to fellowship. We're not going to cover complaints about a staff member, nor complaints about criminal activity, such as sexual assault, nor are requests for compensation included. As we embark on our review, it is timely to reflect on the Vanderbilt Professionalism Pyramid, adopted and promoted by Jerry Hickson, which most of you will have had the pleasure to have met and experienced his entertaining presentation. Jerry has walked us through his model previously, and today I want to capture some integral elements that need to be considered in our review. Firstly, the most egregious complaints are investigated elsewhere, which Jerry captures in the bottom right-hand corner. This enables his system to focus escalating interventions into those behaviours that require immediate addressing and have the most opportunity to achieve long-term behaviour change. This focus on behaviour change is based on the principles of raising one's awareness of the impact that you may have on others. We have all heard him say that the principle is not of judgment, but that there has been a disturbance in the force that indicates that something may be going on. His system, based on no judgment, enables him to be able to act on anonymous complaints because they are not making a judgment. And his system does not require response. They are in the position to actually provide feedback, even if it is scant that a person's behaviour has had a negative impact on another, and still provides the opportunity for insight by that person without fear of punishment, having a defensive reaction, and providing the opportunity for reflection. As Jerry explains, no system is perfect. I think that in his numbers of more than 50,000 baseline complaints, that in his experience there have been 144 individuals in the system that have self-selected to get out of the Vanderbilt health organisations and geographically escape rather than deal with the consequences. They are effectively working the system. The principles that we are proposing to apply in our review for our approach from the Vanderbilt model really focus on being less officious and legalistic. We want to be faster and more responsive in our approach. We can do that if we focus more on behaviour change. It really is about the stolen crackers and less on punishment, judgment, and no longer supporting a legal approach. Remove the response reporting. Instead, at Vanderbilt, the only reporting back to the complainant is a thank you for your complaint, which has been actioned. That person is simply assured that a discussion has been had. No results, responses, or outcome from the complaint are required. In terms of our biggest lessons learned, is the absence in our powers to investigate. We have no specific investigative powers. In terms of an investigation, we are simply standing here with a code of conduct, annual subscription renewal, training agreement, and an accreditation program. While these are powerful and extremely important aspects of the professional lives of surgeons, trainees, IMGs, supervisors, trainers, and training boards, our actions are still bound by rules of procedural fairness and natural justice. But it is different for others. Employers have the benefit of industrial relations legislation that guides and enables workplace investigations and disciplinary actions. Regulators also have more powers through specific legislation that elevates their investigative powers. For example, AHPRA can compel a witness to give evidence, whereas we certainly cannot. Michael Gorton is joining us at the workshop on Thursday to walk us through the investigative power differential and why it's so important that building respect really is a shared endeavour. Ultimately, this means that complaints related to discrimination, bullying, and sexual harassment are more effectively resolved elsewhere by those with greater powers to do so. So the real question for us is not how can we run better investigations. Instead, it is how can we partner with them and support our fellows, trainees, and IMGs to better navigate their complaints processes. So, what can complaints look like in the future for RACs? We want to build on our current triage so that it is more rapid and quickly determines whether a complaint is out of scope, better handled elsewhere, or appropriate for us to manage. We need to be clearer about which complaints are out of scope and that these have very different complaint management processes and approaches, either by other organisations or by different processes within RACs. Those complaints that are better handled elsewhere really relate to individual health outcomes and the fact that state-based health ombudsmen and commissions are better established to deal with those. AHPRA is the place for serious performance and patient safety concerns, and ultimately the employer, with the workplace industrial relations legislation, which makes it illegal for such behaviours to continue. These are the bodies with the powers and the sanctions. But we can be more meaningful partners and embrace the shared endeavour approach. Let's instead provide advice and support to fellows, trainees and IMGs in navigating these processes and achieving better resolution for their complaints. We are proposing a new set of principles for the RAC's response to complaints. These principles include better advice and support to our fellows, trainees and IMGs to help them navigate the complaint process of others, those others who have more powers than us to effectively resolve behaviour complaints in the workplace. Our approach will include, such as the Jerry Hickson example, a focus on bullish and behaviour unbecoming of the code and conduct. We aim not to be investigative. We will make a no judgment position. Our focus is being on collegial, and in doing so and the way we conduct ourselves, aim for behaviour change, not to punish. Always provide the opportunity for RACs to still deal with the egregious or repeated behaviour if that is the wish of the person. But we need to be clear that we do so in a non-investigative and collegial way. We leave the investigations to those with the powers to do so. So what can we do? We can embrace the RAC's version of the Vanderbilt cup of coffee conversation by a pool of EDSA-type peers. Our response depends on their wishes, particularly about their identity. If they agree to provide their identity, the feedback can be more specific and, as you would appreciate, more likely to have a greater impact when discussed with the person and ultimately affect the change we're looking for. But as our approach is non-judgmental, we can act on anonymous complaints or complaints that withhold their identity consent. This means that they do not have to give us consent to share their identity, and this is very powerful. Our aim is for a collegial cup of coffee conversation between peers, focusing on behaviour and providing a peer with the opportunity to be aware of their behaviour and impact on others, reinforce appropriate professional standards, and a reflective piece, while at the same time understanding that surgery as a profession is extremely stressful. In the right way, a conversation could be had together, but feedback on the process is limited to completion with no reporting back on responses. The incident continues to be recorded in the RAC's database. If an anonymity is requested or consent to identity withheld, we still aim for a cup of coffee conversation and provide this peer with the opportunity for awareness building, a reflective piece on professional standards, and also a reflection and insight into how their behaviours affect others. Such a conversation must be tempered and considered to the risk of breaching anonymity, but still affording the opportunity to raise awareness of their behaviour with a peer. It becomes particularly challenging when we need to involve the training boards, as we are all aware of our duty to provide a safe training environment. Because they need to know when it is a trainee making a complaint or if it is about a trainer or supervisor at one of their training posts. In these situations, the training board can and sometimes must intervene with our support, and while they cannot investigate, they should be working with hospitals to make sure the training post is safe and utilise the accreditation processes in place. Like us, our training boards and the specialty societies have no powers to investigate. If the complaint is about a trainee, once again, the training board must be advised, and they are in the best position to intervene with our support and in partnership with the employer for performance management and training assessment actions. Again, in these situations, the training board can and sometimes must intervene with our support. And while they cannot investigate, they should be working together with the hospitals to make sure the training post is safe and utilise the accreditation processes in place. Again, like us, training boards and the specialty societies have no powers to investigate. Working with the training board is much easier when a trainee making a complaint provides their consent and agrees to be identified. We can provide their details, the training board can check on their well-being, review the subject of the complaint, and intervene with RAC's support as appropriate, particularly in determining training post safety. But trainees have every right to withhold consent due to the fear of victimisation. And in these cases, this means that we only provide de-identified complaint data to the training boards in a way that does not risk breaching anonymity. In summary, the future for complaints at RACs could look at a much more rapid triage process that can determine very quickly if a complaint is out of scope, better handled elsewhere, or appropriate for RACs to manage. If it is better handled elsewhere, we should be providing support and advice to help our trainees, IMGs, and fellows navigate those processes. The wishes of a complainant are key, particularly in terms of anonymity and consent. RACs can offer an informal, non-judgmental approach, which really means that anonymous complaints can be actioned. Training boards need knowledge, but understanding that they cannot investigate. Instead, they can intervene with RACs' support to assess post-safety and performance manage poorly behaving trainees, supervisors and trainers. A punitive RACs response requires evidence for professional conduct purposes. Our greatest lesson has been that complaints management is certainly a shared endeavour. Our aim is to empower the regulator, who has the greatest powers of all, to act. Our fellows have a role in this process and are the great leaders. Thank you for today's presentation. I look forward to seeing you all in Council next week, and most importantly, getting together and unpacking this new approach in our workshop on Thursday morning. Safe travels and see you soon. Thank you.